Welcome to the debate. Today, we're delving into a topic that's, well, let's just say it's fraught with complexity. The Anomaly Manufacturing Facility, or AMF. It's the entity that essentially holds the New World together, managing anomalous threats and resources like Oobleck, for better or worse, right? And the core question, honestly drawn from those leak files we've all seen, is stark. Does AMF's track record, its success in keeping us safe from total catastrophe, actually justify the methods? We're talking about practices that seem, on the surface, genocidal, deeply unethical, criminal even.
I have to jump in right there because framing it as success already feels like buying into their narrative. I'm sorry, but I just don't. If you really look closely, if you dissect AMF, what you find isn't success bought with hard choices. It's a fundamentally corrupt machine. It runs on mass murder, driven by an insatiable need for power and control over resources, Oobleck, idiom, you name it. The idea that this is about defense, I think that falls apart when you see the systemic abuses, the cover-ups, the way they betray even their own supposed duties. It's not about necessity. It feels more like calculated exploitation.
Okay, I understand that perspective, I really do. But let's try to frame it differently, maybe focusing purely on function, on necessity for a moment. AMF wasn't born out of some ethical committee meeting. It came about in '62, right? Middle of the Cuban Missile Crisis, existential panic. The goal was raw, strategic defense. Weaponize Oobleck, use it before someone else did. And you have to measure its effectiveness by survival, harsh as that sounds. Think about the phenomena boom 95 to 2008. BAUs everywhere, concealment failing, chaos, 1 million dead in 2008 alone. It was AMF's POs, their phenomena operators, who stepped in and, well, stopped the bleeding. They kept the New World functioning. Their ability to keep going, even through 2 brutal silent wars with SCP, that has to count for something, right? It suggests they're indispensable in a way.
But indispensable based on what? That survival narrative it crumbles when you look at how they built their defenses, how they staff their research. We have the documents. Recruitment Initiative 4 Delta. It wasn't some random draft. It explicitly targeted, and I quote, low-income urban centers with high minority populations. They used trumped-up charges to feed people into the D-class system. This isn't some abstract hard choice during chaos. This was planned, state-backed genocide used for research subjects. And the justification? Pure chilling calculation. Internal memos noted, quote, Hispanic test subjects showed 12% higher Oobleck absorption rates than Caucasian controls. They literally turned race into a variable for cost-effective testing. That's not defense strategy, that's institutionalized malice wearing a lab coat.
That's a deeply disturbing piece of evidence, no question. But you have to consider the operational landscape, the sheer threat. We're talking, 8,000 cataloged BAU species? Dealing with that, it forces a kind of ruthless calculus, doesn't it? One that maybe pushes standard ethics aside. The horrifying truth behind 4 Delta might be that faced with what they saw as imminent extinction, AMF prioritized that cold, hard number, the 12% absorption rate, over everything else. Over human decency. Does that speak to inherent evil? Or maybe to the sheer brutal rationality demanded by Oobleck containment under immense pressure. And it's not like the organization is monolithic. Look at the internal struggles, like that site director election in 2013, Gomez versus Daniel, being illegally overruled. It suggests instability, power plays inside, which ironically might even limit what the top brass can push through without pushback.
Constraints? What constraints matter when you're talking about institutionalized torture and disposal on a mass scale? Let's really go deep, into the D blocks, the mechanics of it. We're talking death row inmates, people sent for mental reevaluation, which, let's be honest, is a euphemism for lethal experimentation, guaranteed. They lived under these inhuman conditions, immorally hard tasks, ridiculous rules like a 9 p.m. bedtime designed purely for psychological breakdown. But the cruelty was the policy. Take Testing Board 144, a 1,657-acre maze test. They dropped 20,000 D-class from helicopters. No supplies, just left him. A review in '91 found 10,000 were already dead. The scale, the sheer waste of life. It shows these people weren't research subjects. They were disposable resources meant to be used up quickly.
The brutality, especially in those early years, it's indefensible by today's standards, absolutely. But between 62 and 70, when AMF was just trying to figure out what UBLAC even was, that D-class system, however horrific, yielded foundational knowledge. Without it, maybe we wouldn't be here to discuss it. The alternative, pure ignorance, might have meant global annihilation. You mentioned the lethality, and I agree, it's staggering. But maybe that's not evidence of AMF's excessive violence, but evidence of how lethal the world had become. Look at their own personnel losses. The MNWAF training for college recruits, 30,000 out of 50,000 either died, were injured, or amnestized. Just in training. It suggests they had to adopt this absolute ruthlessness, just to prepare people to survive contact. And they did try to impose some structure. The Mormon Codex in '99, it was an attempt, at least, to create a public legal framework for anomalous crime in the New World, even while operating in shadows themselves.
The Mormon Codex feels like putting a nice frame on a picture of atrocities. Window dressing. You talk about efficiency, about necessity, but what science requires systematically injecting UBLAC into minorities and civilians? There's only one outcome you can guarantee there. They die. And then AMF moves on to find a new way to torture someone. I just don't buy the necessity argument because look at the scale of the 90s trials, 1990 to 1999. Between 800,000 and maybe 2.5 million people processed through D-block testing, overwhelmingly people of color. That's not science. That's a slaughterhouse. But you want to go deeper? You really want to talk about the depths they sank to? What about the kids? What about the allegations of using children for experiments?
Okay. We have to address that. It's probably the single most horrifying allegation. Site 404, the side operation they apparently ran from 2009 to 2013, using young children, 6 to 14 years old, taken from foster care, from shelters. The alleged technical reason that their cellular structure adapted faster to UBLAC. The records mention a playground in Sector 3. And then note, most children didn't return from testing Chamber B.
A playground. In Sector 3. It's psychological camouflage for systematic murder. We're talking about the calculated execution of minors. There's no justification possible.
The revulsion it's unavoidable. But we have to be precise with the sourcing. A lot of this comes from Marles White, right? Known whistleblower, clearly angry, maybe with an agenda. And crucially, look at how the central organization, the COSD, reacted when this came out. They didn't treat it as a moral failing. They treated it as a breach of secrecy, something to be contained, erased. Site director Krause committed suicide. The witnesses transferred. We know what that means. That's not an organization finding its conscience. That's the Central Command ruthlessly eliminating evidence to maintain secrecy, to maintain control. It shows this cold-blooded commitment to technical standards, to procedure, even if it involves murder. It suggests a core drive that overrides everything else. They even executed Dr. Rodinson, remember? For exceeding the UBLAC injection limit 560 milliliters. They cared about the rules, even if the rules themselves were monstrous.
They care about control, not standards, not ethics, not rules, unless they serve the powerful. AMF is structurally incapable of reform. It's rotten from the core. Honestly, they're just as bad as the criminals they supposedly contain. Maybe even worse than groups like the Bird Gang, in some ways. Their entire internal culture is built on lies. The COSD itself ordered the cover-up of that blender incident in 2004, where a guard blended D-class victims. And Site Director Hammond later just stood up and publicly denied it ever happened, even though internal logs confirmed it.
But that level of violence, that extreme secrecy, isn't that a strategy, a necessary one maybe, given their mission? Which was fundamentally preventing mass panic, preventing the kind of societal collapse that would make containment impossible. And they did succeed at that, didn't they? They kept 89.9% of civilians in the dark about anomalies, even during the worst of the boom. You can argue that prevented millions more deaths just from fear and chaos.
But the silencing proves my point.
They're not just secretive, they're actively a terror organization. Those two journalists, Hale and Mendoza, investigating the Hale case, found dead, ruled suicides, despite, as internal documents later showed, being shot twice in the back of the head. Their so-called ethics committee, everyone knows it's a joke, an ego echo chamber. And the leadership breaks its own rules whenever it suits them. Look at the Gomez election being overturned. It's raw power, plain and simple.
Okay, the tactics are extreme, yes, but necessitated by the threats. You mentioned the Bird Gang, an Itium cartel, an Anomaly criminal network, xenophobic violence, nihilistic torture. They mixed human remains into their product. That's the kind of chaos AMF, for all its deep, deep moral compromises, actually prevents. They are the only force, realistically, that can check the power of groups like that and their ability to survive, to fight and win those silent wars against SCP, to secure the IT resources needed for defense, destroying all SCP ports in 2010. That's arguably why the New World lasted as long as it did. Maybe they are the lesser, the necessary evil.
Calling the fight against SCP anything other than two monsters fighting over resources feels wrong. It was just a contest for dominance. AMF is morally bankrupt. Period. The crimes targeting minorities, the children, the torture, the cover-ups, they outweigh any supposed good. They hide behind necessity, but they break their own rules for power. And in the end, it didn't even work, did it? It all culminated in Black October, 2060. Global chaos anyway. So was it worth it? Is survival worth becoming this, a terror organization ourselves?
Look, AMF provided security, however brutal, in a world literally designed to kill us. They navigated catastrophic wars, population booms. They held a shield, fragile as it was, for decades. The methods, the D-blocks, recruitment, they're dark. They're regrettable doesn't even cover it. But they might reflect the horrifying reality of dealing with 8,000 types of BAUs. That ruthless continuity, even the violent secrecy, maybe that was the only thing stopping worse outcomes sooner. Maybe they just bought us time. Time that ran out in 2060. Time bought at an unthinkable price, yes.
The material forces us to look beyond just, did humanity survive? It makes us ask about the quality of that survival, the moral integrity lost. AMF's legacy isn't one of tough choices. It's a warning about absolute power corrupting absolutely. It shows how even organizations built to protect can become worse than the monsters they fight.
It leaves us with this incredibly painful tension, doesn't it, between absolute survival at any cost, and holding on to some kind of absolute morality. The material lays it bare. We're left to weigh AMF's actions, arguably necessary actions, against the chaos they held back, and decide if creating a monster was justified to fight monsters. It's not an easy calculation.